People who were in a coma, what the hell did you think when you woke up? Back in the 90s, my great-grandfather had a stroke. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and when he finally woke up, he couldn't speak English anymore. The only language he could use was Choctaw. He had learned it as a kid because his family lived near a Choctaw reservation, and he used to play with a bunch of local kids. Back then, he spoke the language fluently, but over the years, he forgot it completely. By the time of his stroke, he couldn't remember a single word. For about 10 days after waking up, Choctaw was the only thing he could speak. Then one night, he had a terrible nightmare, and when he woke up, suddenly he could speak only English again, without remembering even one word of Choctaw. He also claimed he could repeat, word for word, every single conversation that had taken place in his hospital room while he was in that coma. Whoa, the brain really is a wild thing. If I'm not mistaken, there was this one guy who woke up from a coma speaking Cantonese, and he actually ended up dating a Chinese girl because of it. I was in a coma for 4 days. When I finally woke up, everyone around me was talking about some baby of mine. I had lost my long-term memory and didn't even remember that I'd been pregnant. My son was in the children's hospital in the NICU. I'd given birth to him by C-section at just 29 weeks. It all happened because of Crohn's disease, something I only learned about after waking up. During the pregnancy, my colon had ruptured. My husband told me that when I first came to, I was talking like a little kid. I remember feeling completely exhausted when I woke up, and for the next few days, I was still kind of out of it. I even recalled overhearing a conversation between my mom and a nurse while I was unconscious. A couple of days later, my long-term memory started coming back, and I remembered everything up until my second surgery. My son was actually born during the third surgery. Edit. Basically, what shocked me the most when I woke up was finding out I had a baby. Is your son okay? Yeah. When he was born, he weighed just 1,474 grams. But now he's 18 years old and 6 feet 5 inches tall. Thanks for asking. I was in a coma for 9 days. When I finally woke up, I was still hooked up to a ventilator. And when they took me off it, my body didn't remember how to breathe on its own. I literally had to relearn how to do it. It took me several days. I had no natural sense of how long or how deeply to inhale, how long to hold it, or how slowly to let it out. I had to focus all of my attention on every single breath. Honestly, it was terrifying. Edit. For everyone who was wondering how I managed to sleep, well, I didn't. At least not for the first couple of days. Every time I dozed off, my oxygen monitor would start beeping like crazy and wake me up. And then the nurse would yell across the ICU, reminding me to breathe. I couldn't talk because I had tubes in both my nose and throat, but I remember one time, exhausted, waking up to that damn alarm again. I forced myself to concentrate on breathing, but I was so pissed off. The nurse ran over, shouting at me to breathe, and I just glared at her and mouthed, "Yes, I'm breathing." She must have read my lips and caught my frustration, because she threw her hands up and went, all right, good job," and walked away. I'm sharing this now because I never really had the chance to before. My ability to breathe normally came back about a month later. Health-wise, I'm totally fine now, so I wouldn't say it left me with any lasting problems. Well, thanks. Now I'm overthinking every single breath. Don't forget to blink. You little jerk, you just ruined the next 30 minutes of my life. My mom was in a medically induced coma for 3 months. When she finally woke up, she thought the hospital staff was trying to kill her. She tried to get out of bed, but collapsed onto the floor because she couldn't walk. What scared her most was that her legs had lost their shape completely. She had to relearn how to control every single muscle. She couldn't speak properly, and had even forgotten how to write. When she learned again, her handwriting looked completely different. She once told me she hated how perfect her hands looked. Her nails and cuticles were spotless, untouched, just because she hadn't used them for so long. I remember trying to brush her hair after she woke up, and almost all of it fell out. While she was in the coma, she nearly died multiple times. She developed sepsis after diverticulitis and a failed surgery. Most of her hair eventually grew back, and she managed to walk again, but her brain was damaged. Now she always looks a little drunk, constantly dizzy, like the world is tilting around her. It's been 5 years since then, and honestly, her recovery feels nothing short of a miracle. This is the saddest story I've seen in this thread. Oh my God, it's terrifying. He must have felt like this was some kind of punishment for something terrible. My wife was in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. When she woke up, she had false memories, ones completely based on conversations that had happened in her hospital room. For example, she thought she had flown to Washington for treatment. While she was in a coma, my dad had been talking about just returning from a work trip to Washington. Somehow, she overheard it while unconscious, and her brain twisted it into the belief that she had been there. Even after we explained where she actually was, it took days for her to fully accept reality. My brother-in-law had a brain tumor, so he was unconscious for a while when he was first admitted to the hospital. The nurses were Asian, and when he woke up, he kept apologizing to everyone for making them come all the way to Japan just to visit him. My stepdad was in a coma for about 3 weeks, and when he woke up, he couldn't find his teeth. We had completely forgotten where we put them, and spent a whole week looking. At one point, he just collapsed dead onto the hospital sink out of nowhere. They resuscitated him, but couldn't figure out why he was struggling to breathe. Later, the doctor sat us down and showed x-rays. His dentures were still in his mouth. They'd forgotten to remove them when they inserted the tubes, which blocked his airway or something like that. So yeah, we eventually found them. I was in a coma for 4 days due to bacterial meningitis. When I woke up, I was completely deaf. I had to communicate with my parents and doctors using a notepad and pen. Gradually, my hearing returned in my left ear, but my right ear is still 100% deaf to this day. You? Someone else who had bacterial meningitis. I'm so glad you survived. Trust me, it could have been so much worse. Thanks, man. I'm glad I pulled through too. The doctors gave me a 10% chance to live. Glad you made it as well. Edit, just talked to my mom. She said the doctors actually gave me only a 5% chance of survival. Holy shit. My wife was in a medically induced coma for 4 days. She had a reaction to contrast dye and her heart stopped for 20 minutes. For nearly 3 months she talked with her long-dead parents. She spoke about them as if they were in the next room, or she would say that our daughter or her brother had called, even though they hadn't. She was convinced her mother and father were alive. It drove me crazy having to gently correct her over and over every day. She spun these elaborate stories about what people, family, friends, neighbors, were doing or saying. It was like pure creative fiction. After about 3 months, she started to come back to herself. The confabulation stopped, and everything shifted. Now she can remember recent events, but her long-term memories are gone. I can't imagine what that must feel like, but it has to be awful. Sometimes she cries over the memories she's lost, but overall she's doing really well. My father had a reaction to contrast dye after a head injury. He had seizures, and it was like his brain had to reboot. The only words he could get out were, "How's the girl?" My sister had just been born at the time. He couldn't hold or grab things. He spent several months in therapy. Eventually his mood shifted. He became very short-tempered, a little impatient, and extremely sleepy. Now he's fine, apart from some lingering neck pain. About 20 years ago, my cousin had a serious head injury from a fall. He was around 20 at the time and was in a coma for nearly 4 weeks. When he woke up, he quickly discovered he had eidetic memory. He could recall any conversation word for word, and even tell you the exact date and time you said something. On top of that, he could memorize an image in just a few seconds. His memory is still eidetic to this day. It's insanely annoying. Every time he reminds me of something I said in the past, usually something I don't even remember, I'm tempted to bonk him on the head again. Judging by what happened last time he got hit on the head, he'd probably just gain another superpower. Better not risk trying to fix him. Nah, he's just glitching. You need to turn him off and on again. DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, put me in a coma. My memories of being sick are fuzzy. The overall sense of time was just mush. Even years later, I can't piece together a proper timeline. I have flashes of memories of different doctors coming in and out of the room. As soon as I came out of the coma, I still felt out of it. When you're on an insulin drip, doctors check your sugar every hour. I could never really sleep, yet I felt like I was asleep the whole time. It's hard to describe. Time just felt like this mushy, stretching blur. I was in a coma for almost 6 weeks. When I woke up, I had to relearn everything. Most of my speech abilities were still there, but my motor skills were terrible. I had to learn how to wipe my own ass and how to go up and down stairs. That took about 3 weeks. I also lost a ton of weight. I'm 6 feet 3 inches and dropped to around 143 pounds. 6 weeks? Jesus Christ. I had a severe head injury, and they did an MRI with contrast dye, to which I was highly allergic. I flatlined on the table within minutes. My 14-year-old nephew was in a medically induced coma for over 3 months. During that time, he lost about 30% of his body weight because his muscles atrophied. The first thing he said when he saw himself was, "Did you forget to feed me?" It was unbelievably hard to hear, especially since his family had been sitting and crying at his bedside the whole time he was unconscious. I was in a coma for 3 weeks, from September 2nd to 26, 2001. I was driving through Pennsylvania on my way to Ithaca to meet with the head of marketing at the company I was working for at the time. I set off on this trip on September 2nd, and I don't remember much about what happened except what the doctors and hospital staff told me. The gist is, I got hit or run over by a drunk driver trying to cross 3 lanes to reach the exit I was on. Basically, I ended up in his blind spot at the worst possible moment, and on top of that, he was completely wasted. Pretty much anyone here can guess what happened on September 11th, 2001. It felt like I had been teleported or time traveled. 1 minute, I was behind the wheel, the next I was smashed in a bloody mess. I was on a hospital bed with a brace on my back and neck, burns from gas and airbags, and 4 in my arm, and a few other minor injuries. When I woke up, I was in a completely different world than the one I left before I fell asleep. The economy had been fine. Everything in the world was generally okay. And then I woke up. Chaos. That's all there was at that point. Thank you so much for watching. In the comments, feel free to share, if you've been in a coma, what completely shocked you when you woke up. Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on our channel. Hugs, bye!